Welcome to the Sam and Sam Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network with myself, Sam McGinnis, and my co-host, Sam Teets. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. I got a football game tomorrow, so that's always exciting. You got to get yourself pumped for those. And speaking of football, we're actually going to start there today. You've got some updates for us on the NFL side of things.
Yeah, it's been a little bit. Well, it's been getting even more hectic on the NFL side of things, as you mentioned, because of COVID-19. The Jets had some false positives today, but they've been cleared to play. So originally there was some thought that maybe we would have a situation where the Cardinals and Jets game, I think that's who they're playing, didn't get played tomorrow or on Sunday, sorry. But rather, it was false positives. That's good news. They'll actually be going out and playing the game. The real concern right now is the Patriots and the Titans, mainly the Titans, but the Patriots also kind of getting lumped in there at this point. They all had negative tests today, but they've moved back the Denver-New England game to Monday night. They've moved the Buffalo-Tennessee game to Tuesday. There's a possibility that Buffalo-Tennessee game doesn't get played this week because Tennessee still has to, continue having negative tests after they've had so many positive tests spread out over the past week and a half. And of course, for New England, like I said, New England team got moved back, partially because Stephon Gilmore, the all-star, all-world cornerback, tested positive for COVID-19 shortly after Cam Newton did. So we're in a situation right now with the NFL where the scheduling is going to get pretty messy, especially if we can't play these Monday and Tuesday night games. My question for you is, it's been proven now that the Titans have violated the COVID-19 protocols. They had a player come down with a positive test. They were instructed to do no more in-person workouts. And players met up outside the facility and had in-person workouts. So my question to you is, there's been talk about being some monumental punishment potentially coming for Tennessee and for its players. My question to you is, should these guys be punished and should they have to forfeit games because of their negligence?
So there are two things with this. In any normal situation, I would say, yeah, they should definitely be punished for it, because if you are part of a league and you agree to a set of rules, you have to follow them. That's just your word as a man. Forget even football there. That's just your word, period. But two, how many other teams are doing this and we're just not hearing about it? I mean, you think you're really going to stop every team in the league from going out and doing this even off-site with football players? Like, football players are going to do what they want the majority of the time. You're not going to stop them unless you do something very hefty and continue to do it when you find out about it and really get in depth with it. So should they be punished? Should the NFL go further with this? Probably. Will they? That's hard to say.
Yeah, it's hard to dictate rules to a bunch of millionaires pretty much who are playing football. It's hard to do that, especially when they are in their early 20s to late 30s. So I think there's going to be trouble here enforcing the rules. I mean, it's much easier with the NBA because you have a much smaller player group. You can put it in a controlled bubble situation. But for the NFL, when you really can't enforce any of these rules and you got players who are allowed to go wherever they want, yeah, I'm not against that. I'm not saying that. But I think players have definitely dropped their guard here and not literally lived up to expectations, because you're trying to do this. You got to realize, if you're irresponsible and you break these rules, it doesn't matter what you think about COVID, how serious or not serious you think it is. If you come down with a positive test, you're jeopardizing your team's season and you're jeopardizing the league season. And if the league decides that you're going to shut down your team or the entire season in general, you're not going to get paid. And everyone else on your team is not going to get paid. Because the NFL is not playing you to not play football. So that's the big concern right now, is you got to realize here, if you're a player, you need to step it up, because otherwise you're not going to be getting paid at all.
Well, yeah, and what you said about even if you don't think this is a big deal, the fact of the matter is, if your team needs you and you're not there, you're hurting your team. So you got to think about your teammates in that sense too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not putting any blame on Stephon Gilmore or Cam Newton. Who knows how they got COVID? Because honestly, it's so ridiculously hard to track this kind of stuff at this point. But those are two marquee players for them. Those are two of the team's best players. Cam Newton at quarterback, obviously, has a huge step up from Brian Hoyer or Jarrett Stidham. So not having him really hurt them against Kansas City. And then Stephon Gilmore is maybe the best defensive player in the league, or certainly up there. So not having him is going to be a huge issue for them. So if you're a player, you really have to be more unselfish, I would think, than some of the guys have been up to this point.
Well, and as you said, they are in their 20s and 30s and millionaires. Funny enough, you're actually insulting your own age bracket, but it's true.
But
sometimes you got to
listen,
take
man, I go to college with some very interesting people. Okay, I'm allowed to insult my own age bracket here.
it. Yeah. All right.
You know how it works. It's a very interesting situation here, and so that's really what I'm talking about. You've got a bunch of people who are probably at the peak of their really wanting to get out in the world and just have fun and also make an impact to some degree, whether it's with charities or whether it's just party, whatever it is. They want to be able to go out and live their lives. And when you have the kind of money, you're able to do that. The issue is now that you're in a situation where you really can't. It's just not a kind of normal business situation where you work for a company and they're telling you, oh, you can work from home. It's okay. It's not that kind of situation. You're going to be in the league, in the locker room every day, making contact with hundreds of people, staff members, and your own teammates. So really any kind of drop in caution here could lead to a serious outbreak in a locker room, which could lead to teams having to forfeit games. And again, I'm totally against forfeiting games because to me that reminds me too much of like a high school kind of football mentality. If you're a professional league, I don't think you would want to forfeit games like this. But at the same time, I'm just like, I want as much football as possible. And if the Titans are that, like, just they broke the rules just like that, they're that ignorant to the situation, I'm all for whatever punishments come forward for them.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to lay it heavy, and I think that's something the league has been bad at doing. So it would be nice to see them do something appropriate for once.
The NFL has gotten a lot of things wrong in the last couple of years, Sam. We can all admit that. The NFL has gotten plenty of things wrong. And right now, with COVID-19, I think they're doing their best. I mean, obviously, they're not going to bat 1,000 this year. It's just impossible. You're going to have situations and outbreaks. This will probably not be the last one. But really, you have to make sure the players recognize the fact that you're not going to tolerate this from them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or coaching staff.
Now we're going to move on to the NHL because we have some big NHL news today. So do you want to hit us with a little bit of that? We'll go back and forth with this.
Yeah, NHL news. So Henrik Lundqvist, has signed with the Capitals. He's going to the Capitals. And I did have questions for you, but I want to save it for thinking you're dreaming. But this certainly seems like an interesting move here. Capitals also moved on from a player as well. They've had some interesting changes here. I'm wondering how this improves the Capitals at all. Because obviously they were Stanley Cup champions like 2 years ago now. So they're in a situation where they're kind of in a post-championship era here. How are they going to get back to being a Stanley Cup contender?
So Henrik Lundqvist adds both potential and risk. So this is hit or miss big time for the Capitals organization because Henrik Lundqvist is getting older. He didn't have a fantastic season last year statistically anyway. Okay, so he's starting to drop off. The Rangers got rid of him. They've got new goalies now that they're going to work with. They're moving on towards the future. But you do bring in that high-end experience, and having been a fantastic goaltender who's in up there with the top wins of all time, he's up there with those guys. There's a potential he could get hot for a season and help take them much further. But at the same time, you're risking the fact that he's old enough and had enough experience at this point that he could just fall off a cliff. So to me, as a Capitals management, as the Capitals management, I would want to have a backup plan to Braden Holtby, and they might have one in their current backup, but we're going to have to see where that goes. But yeah, I don't particularly hate this signing. It'll be really nice for them if Henrik Lundqvist does hit off. But as for the Capitals as a whole, they had 1 year. Honestly, they had 1 year. It was second round and out for them before that. Now they can't even make it past the first round. You had 1 year. You proved pretty much, congratulations, you did it once, and you can't do anything else. To me, they've got something to prove still.
Yeah, it's just saying basically they won it, but they haven't proved they're a consistent organization. Because that's what I'm hearing. But I mean, Henrik Lundqvist, 38 years old. I mean, there's a reason he's up there. There's a reason he's up there all-time wins because he's been playing for a long time.
Yeah.
So really, that'll be interesting to see how and if he's capable of going out there and being being anything that he was like earning his career, is capable of being a star player again. But there's also another move here. Max, I'm trying to read this. My vision is not really great today. Max Domi, a third-round pick, gets traded for Josh Anderson to Montreal.
Yeah, so Max Domi is actually helpful for the Columbus Blue Jackets, and here's why. Columbus has one problem. They cannot score to save their lives. They just can't. Their defense is good. Their goaltending is good. They've got the whole back end set. No problems there. You've got Seth Jones, one of the greatest defensemen in the league. Their problem is scoring. So Josh Anderson on a consistent basis might not get as many points as Max Domi just in a pure sense. So adding Max Domi plus getting a third-round pick, I would have almost thought that you should have had the third-round pick the other way and Montreal get that. So this is a win in my mind for the Blue Jackets, no doubt. And hopefully for the organization, Max Domi makes an immediate impact.
So if you add scoring to the Blue Jackets, how much of a contender are they really? Because you said that's their base issue right now. If you can add that to their team, where does it put them?
So they've got a good coach. He helped elevate them even when they were low with player injuries last year. So coaching might not be a question here. Your defense is good. Your goaltending is good. The missing piece is scoring. So if you add that, yeah, they could be contenders. There's some nervousness I have just because of my gut, but if you look at it from a pure sense, that should make them contenders.
So, anyway, what's your gut telling you, though?
My gut's telling me I'm having a hard time because here's the thing. It's the same thing with the Capitals for me. Look at their playoffs. Well, the last, I think 4 or 5 times they've been to the playoffs, they've won 1 to 2 series, depending on if you consider this last series against the Maple Leafs. That wasn't technically playoffs. It was qualifiers. So even if you count that, they're like, 2-4 in their last series. That kind of says something that I'm it's a little nervous. It's something you kind of have hard time trusting. It's the same thing with the Capitals for me. Second round out. Oh, well, we made it to the finals and we won. Well, now we're first round out. So maybe they'll win another cup somewhere in there, but there are just certain things that make you nervous.
Yeah, we'll see if your gut's right on this one because it certainly wasn't right when it came to the NHL finals, but we'll see if that turns around.
See, never change what you think in the first place. At the very beginning, before this series started, I said to myself, the Lightning were going to win. Dallas won game 1, and I switched it. That was a dumb move. Stick with your gut through it.
See, it's too bad you didn't say that on camera because we don't have any verified confirmation that. Do you actually believe that?
If at the very least, you can believe Mike said that. He 100% did too. So you've got that at least.
Of course he did. Of course Mike did.
There's no questions here.
That only makes sense. But I think we covered. Is that all you want to talk about in the NHL update today?
I think one other thing is we've got another big goaltender signing, and this is Braden Holtby to the Vancouver Canucks. So this is the previous Capitals goalie who's now leaving. He's one of the better goalies of this decade. He's set some of his own on-par records so far. And here's my thing with this one. This last year, again, statistically, it was shaky. It wasn't a great year in that sense for Braden Holtby. However, that's 1 year. I think he could make a significant impact for the Vancouver Canucks. Granted, they already had a good goaltender, so how much of a contender this will really make them in difference might not be all that much, but they're at least filling the hole.
How close are they to being a championship caliber team, or what do they need to add for they're trying to actually get out there and be a serious Stanley Cup contender?
Here's the thing for me. They're not far. They might already be in the range of outside potential, but they're not far. I mean, they've got some great young talent. They've had some hit-offs with Quinn Hughes and Elias Patterson in the last couple of years. They're getting Braden Holtby again, filling that already was filled position. I just add in wherever you can that you need it, but frankly, they're not all that far away.
All right, sounds like we got some competitive teams getting better in the NHL. But I believe that's all we want for the NHL update for today. So we're going to move on to my NBA update. Of course, we got Game 5 being played tonight, right now. They're probably finishing up the first quarter. They're probably just getting to maybe to the midpoint in the second quarter at the moment. But the Heat are obviously not basically do-or-die situation here. It's 3-1. The Lakers are up. I don't see the Miami Heat being able to close out this, being able to go back and make a comeback and win this series. I just don't. They don't have the superstar power able to do it. I love Jimmy Butler. I really do. I think Tyler Herro is a pretty great shooter. He's a pretty clutch shooter usually. And Bam Adebayo's come back at the same point. even though the Heat are better coached, the star level of LeBron James and Anthony Davis is just so much higher than anything the Heat have. Hopefully they can force it to 6 games, but really thinking it's going to go 7, thinking the Heat are going to come back and win this series. I mean, that's just a huge stretch for me. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't think it's possible for the Heat to come back. I know Bam, like I said, Bam's back. The only thing that could maybe save them is if Goran Dragic came back. But really, the chances of him being out of slim, he's been hurt. And even if he does come back, that adds a lot of depth to him, adds a little bit of playmaking. But really, the Lakers put the clamps on Miami when they put Anthony Davis on Jimmy Butler defensively. Because Butler goes from having a 40-point triple-double to having just like 25 points. Because Anthony Davis is so versatile, he's capable of shutting down a smaller player on the perimeter and still being good enough to recover inside and to get blocks if he has to.
Well, and here's the thing we talked about already. It's already hard to come back from a 3-1 series. We saw that with the Dallas Stars during the finals, too. They came close to forcing they came to a game 6, but it's very difficult already. And then when the other team has LeBron James and Anthony Davis, or in the NHL's case, Victor Hedman, it's very hard to you can't put yourself in that situation with those kind of players. You just can't.
No, you can't put yourself in a 3-1 hole. They would have had to make it 2-2 to really have a chance in my book. I love when I hate they're my favorite team. But going down 3-1, that's a backbreaker usually. I mean, 2-2, and you've got a real shot. Because you're going to get Bam back, you're going to get Goran Dragic potentially back. It's getting down 3-1 against the best player in the world and potentially a top 5 player in the world in Anthony Davis, who's now covering your best player on offense. I mean, you're really in a hole here. I don't think there's any way they come out of it. And at the same point, like I said, huge props to Miami for getting this far. And they're a better coach team. Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in the NBA. But they just don't have the pieces right now to counter what the Lakers are doing.
Well, and yeah, it's hard. You just can't. You can't say it enough times. Putting yourself in a hole against a great team is just a bad idea from the start. It's just you see, I had something else and I've lost it, but we'll move on. We'll move on here to what should be college football update as well. If I remember, we'll bring it up though.
There's not a whole lot to update here for college football. We kind of already discussed it last week. But number 7 Miami is playing number 1 Clemson. You're playing here. I don't have a ticket because, let's face it, there's 20,000 people requesting tickets and only about 3,000 students are getting them. So it's not going to be like everyone gets one. But the Clemson-Miami game is probably the most anticipated game of our year so far. We do play Notre Dame, who's number 5 right now, later in the season. But I would argue that Miami's a better team, even though they're lower ranked. I mean, this is Trevor Lawrence versus De'Aaron King, Cameron Harris versus Travis Etienne, Miles Murphy versus Quincy Roche. It's going to be a phenomenal game, hopefully. And I'm still rooting for Clemson. I still think Clemson's going to pull out just because we're a more talented team, in my opinion. We're a more experienced team. But the Miami Hurricanes, who I wrote off a lot at the beginning of the year, they're a much better team than I anticipated. This is a legitimate team. And if they were playing in a conference other than – let's say this. Miami is playing in the Pac-12. Miami would be the best team in the Pac-12. But because they're in the ACC, they're probably not going to make the college football playoffs. It's likely that the winner of this team will make the college football playoffs, and the loser probably won't.
And I actually remembered what I was going to say. This proves that despite the fact that you mentioned the Heat, but it proves that even if you like a team, you don't necessarily have to be biased. You can totally.
Yeah, I can be unbiased here. Like I picked when Clemson played LSU last year for the national title. And for those of you who don't know, I'm at Clemson University right now. I attended Clemson. Our professor gave us the opportunity to pick the final score of the game and the winner, and we would get to avoid doing an assessment that we had to do every week. And I picked. You bet. I picked LSU and Joe Burrow. And I picked the closest to anyone in the class for the final score of the game, and I ended up getting that pass and not having to do it. Now, was I a little bit ashamed when everyone looked at me when I said I picked LSU? Maybe just a little bit. Did I lose some public credibility? Possibly a little. But at the same point, I was right. So that's what matters.
Yeah, so just proof that you can remain at least somewhat unbiased at the same time you like teams.
Yeah, I'm capable of doing that. But really – I mean, if the Heat would pull us out and win this series, I'd be over the moon. Like, legitimately, I'd be so happy.
That would be incredible. LeBron James, Anthony Davis, but we're still on college football. Unless that's
so we're still somehow in college football, but really, I mean, look, there's not a lot to talk about with college football. They've been off and on tests. Notre Dame, which had to postpone one of their games originally for COVID-19, they're playing again for the first time in 2 or 3 weeks. We're seeing teams. I think this is what's going to happen. Is you're going to see teams that get maybe a couple of COVID cases. They're going to quarantine a couple of guys. They're going to do contact tracing, and then probably going to postpone a game. They might have to stay out of football for 2 or 3 weeks, but then they'll come back. They'll keep playing again. I think this is what we're going to expect from this year. But right now, the big thing we're waiting on is the Big Ten to come back. Because they're coming back the 24th, the weekend of the 24th. So right now, we're just kind of waiting on them, waiting for them to join the party. It's going to be great. And I'm also pumped for the SEC. The SEC this season has been really good because they're playing an in-conference schedule, which means you get to see a lot of high-powered matchups. And they right now have the number 2, 3, and 4 teams in the nation in Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. And those teams have to play each other at some point this year, so it's going to be a great season for SEC football.
And I have a quick question for you that revolves around the college football playoffs here. If a team has an outbreak right around the same time as the college football playoffs, could a team potentially miss the playoffs and the 5th seed get a spot?
You know, that's a really good question, yes. That's actually like so good that I don't know if I can answer that. But let me put it this way. If you are legitimate top 4 team, like say if we don't have any controversy and the 4 teams are clear. Like right now, the top 4 teams in the nation to me are absolutely clear because Notre Dame's number 5. Notre Dame is not a top 4 team to me at all. So if it's a situation where, say the college football playoffs were starting tomorrow and Florida, the number 4 team, started having cases of COVID-19, I would want you to push the series. I would want you to push the playoffs back because that's the team that deserves to be in it. But at the same point, it's a money thing. Let's put it this way.
Yeah,
they care more about the money than about the fairness of the competition. I think look at it this way. I could see the people overseeing this decision putting the number 5 team into the college football playoffs just because it allows them to make the most possible money.
Well, it also serves as a story too, or at least to the college students there. All of a sudden, you've got something to be excited about.
That's true. It's really good for one team, but it's also super depressing for another one. So it's kind of give and take there.
Why? And then if one person was an idiot who got it for the rest of the team, like we were talking about with the NFL, we've heard death threats for stupid things in the past in the college football. I can only imagine the amount of criticism this player would get.
Yeah, wasn't it like a Michigan State or a Michigan punter a couple of years ago?
Yeah, that's
that's what you're thinking about. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about too. Because I remember he got death threats after that. So could you imagine I don't think they would reveal the information to who was sick because I think it's protected medical data, and I know that they reveal it sometimes to the NFL. That's because NFL insiders are really good at their jobs. For college football, it's a little bit more protected because they're students. So I don't think we would find out who got sick or how it spread. But at the same point, you're right. If for some reason someone leaked that information, I mean, the outcome could be catastrophic for the individual who came down with it first.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we move on to Sam Teets' Flex of the Week. I may have highlighted one of them because he was trying to decide between 2, and I really liked one of them, so I think you should say it.
Yeah, I originally was thinking about Jimmy Butler's 40-point triple-double, but that kind of happened last week when we were like just after we had our show, or it actually was occurring as we were doing the show. But really, the flex of the week is Nick Foles beating Tom Brady again. Yeah. I mean, it just comes back to this. Tom Brady loses the weirdest quarterbacks. I swear, he's losing records to the weirdest guys. But Nick Foles gets Tom Brady. The Chicago Bears advance to 4-1. They win 2019 over Tom Brady's injured Buccaneers, who were heavily penalized throughout the game. I mean, it was a sloppy football game, don't get me wrong, but Tom Brady has to play better. And Nick Foles didn't play phenomenal, but you know what? He beats Tom Brady again. That's another notch in Nick Foles' belt to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom Brady, I was concerned at first, then he started doing well, and now I'm concerned again. He's turned into kind of an inconsistent mess.
He really has. No, he really is inconsistent. I don't know the identity of Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this year. I would assume that as we get closer to the end of the season, they'll figure things out. Because it's usually what happens, even in New England, when they have struggles. They usually figure things out in the second half of the year. They've also been missing Chris Godwin because he's been hurt. O.J. Howard's out for the year. Leonard Fournette's been hobbled. So there's been injuries here, but at the same point, I would have expected much more from Tampa Bay so far this year than what I've gotten. Really, I mean, the Buccaneers had a phenomenal game last week against the Chargers when Tom Brady threw 5 touchdowns. But he got beat up by Chicago's defensive line. And really, I mean, the defense for Tampa Bay did their job. They held the Bears to 20 points. That's really all you can ask for in the modern NFL. But Brady, scored more than 19 points. That offense has to be better.
Well, and here's a question, a couple of questions for Tampa Bay. We talked about it a little bit before the season, but from your analysis, how is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line doing for Tom Brady as of now?
It's not terrible. It's not a terrible offensive line. But it got absolutely destroyed last night by the Chicago Bears. I mean, Khalil Mack had 2 sacks. It could have easily had 4. I think 1 or 2 of them were taken off because of penalties. So really, he got pummeled. And it was quite clear if you watched the game just how bad it was. That offensive line is putting up very little resistance as the pass rushers basically flying through there, gunning for Tom Brady's head. And it's partially on the offensive line because I think they have a limit. Tristan Wirfs has been doing all right. The guys they have there, Ryan Jensen at center, have been doing okay. But there is a limit to how good this offensive line can play. And the offensive line play in the NFL right now is not nearly as good as it was 3 or 4 years ago. But at the same point, this has got to be questionable moving forward because you play Chicago again in the playoffs. Because 4-1 teams generally make the playoffs, especially now that they have a 7th seed in each conference. If you play Chicago again, or if New Orleans gets their pass rush going, you could run into a serious situation here where Tom Brady just might not be able to escape what's coming for him.
Yeah, and then here comes another question. Is it time to panic, or how high is the panic right now for you, for Tampa Bay, and for Tom Brady?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say 2. I'm really not that worried just because Tom Brady's had issues in New England before where the Patriots have started slow, or the Patriots haven't had all their offensive weapons. And through the first, let's say, 7 weeks, they don't look right. And then by the end of the year, they finish strong. They go 5-1 in the final 6 weeks, and they're fine. So I'm not that worried for Tampa Bay yet. I will say this. They are ceiling, I think, is lower than I originally anticipated. I think their ceiling is probably a divisional round team versus being a conference championship contender like I originally thought. Especially because I think the Seattle Seahawks, they have a worse defense, significantly worse defense than Tampa Bay, but their offense is just on fire right now. I think the Seahawks and the Packers, to me, are better than the Buccaneers in the NFC. And we're talking about the NFL as a whole. The Chiefs, obviously, the Buffalo Bills as well. Those teams are better. I wouldn't rule out Baltimore. So really, the Bucs are not – they're a borderline top 5 team just because of the talent they have. He's not proven Tom Brady is. But I'm beginning to get shaken by how mediocre he's been at points this year.
Yeah, it's been very inconsistent for Tom Brady. But you were talking about the Seahawks a little bit, and I wanted to bring this up before we move on to our final segment. I was looking at the NFC this year for Super Bowl contenders, right? And I found that the majority of what may be contenders have pretty decent holes in their lines, not like offensive or defensive lines, but holes in their roster. And to me, the top 2 teams right now, just because I don't trust the Saints, might be the Rams and Packers for the NFC moving forward.
The Rams? Did you see the Rams?
I did for Super Bowl contenders. The Saints that.
Why?
And the defense. Well, they've done pretty well, and I don't see them as much in the way of holes as I do at least Seattle.
Okay, but they just beat the Giants 17-9 this past week. They didn't crush the New York Giants. A team, I think the San Francisco 49ers rolled over 43-6 or something like that.
As you mentioned, every team has its rough spots. And as we were talking about Tom Brady, he lost to the Bears, who only scored 20 points. Granted, the Giants are far worse than the Bears.
Yeah.
But moving forward, I would throw it in there as at least as a potential. And if it isn't the Rams, to me, then the Packers are the clear favorite because I don't trust the Saints one bit.
What about the Seahawks? You have problems with the Seattle? I mean, they're undefeated.
Their defense is garbage. That may come to bite them in the butt.
Yeah, it probably will. But honestly, Russell Wilson can put up 45 points a game. You see what DK Metcalf's doing.
Russell Wilson may even get them maybe to the conference finals even. But could you see Seattle with that defense winning the championship?
Probably not. I mean, I even said earlier today on the NFL show, which you should check out on the Google and Truth Facebook page, that I would take the Packers over Seattle in a conference championship game or in a playoff game just because Green Bay is the more complete team. But to me, the Rams and Seahawks always play each other close. It's a divisional matchup that has been phenomenal in the past couple of years. No matter how overly powered one team is, the other team always plays it close. But if you're asking me, you're just putting these two teams on paper and you're asking me, are you trusting a team led by Russell Wilson that I know will score 35 points per week versus the Rams led by Jared Goff that put up 20 points against the New York Giants? I would much rather have the Seattle Seahawks every day of the week.
All right. But yeah, I'm thinking the AFC may have the advantage this year when it comes to Super Bowl contenders.
Oh, yeah, I would think the AFC is probably the place to be just because of Kansas City, Buffalo, Baltimore, even Pittsburgh's undefeated, Tennessee's undefeated. Whether they continue playing games or not, we'll find out. But really, I think the AFC has the upper hand. The only two teams that I would give a chance to in the NFC are Seattle and Green Bay. The Seahawks would really depend on what the Super Bowl matchup is. If they're playing a team that's got a really good defense, a really balanced offense, they're playing, let's say, Kansas City, they are screwed. But if they're playing some other team like Tennessee or Pittsburgh, they probably have an upper hand. I don't see Tennessee or Pittsburgh making it to the Super Bowl, but I'm just saying, if that's a possible matchup, they have a shot with their defense.
All right, and now we move on to our final segment. Again, one of my personal favorites, Thinking or Dreaming. You want to start us off, Sam Teets?
Yeah, I'll ask you this. With 38-year-old Henrik Lundqvist, the Capitals aren't any better off than they were originally.
Yeah, that's 100% thinking. It's not that they're necessarily worse, but that remains to be seen. Again, we talked about this. Is Henrik Lundqvist going to return to form and bring that veteran into this? Or is he then going to be a secondary role to their backup who looked pretty good? Or what's going on with that? We don't know. So it's a little uncertain. But if he does return to form, you got a shot. You definitely got a shot. The thing is we've been saying this about the Capitals all but 1 year. And again, there are just some teams, they're regular season teams. The Capitals are one of them. I know they've won a cup. It was 1 year. I don't see the long-term output from the Capitals. I see second round out, now first round out. They should be going further in the playoffs.
All right, and my second one for you today is the NFL will force the Tennessee Titans to forfeit at least 2 games.
Yes, they were stupid. I feel like this might be taking it far considering other teams are probably doing the same thing, or at least potentially. I don't know. As a fan, this would kind of suck. And for a professional league, there comes a point at which I feel like they're not harsh enough. So maybe. But honestly, this is probably one of the more controversial ones we've had here within me anyway, where it's hard for me to determine thinking or dreaming. But I feel like this should be more on the dreaming end. That might be taking it a little far, unless this continues to be like a problem, like people continually get it, and it becomes a scheduling impossibility. I feel like it should be a last resort.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a little bit far-fetched. I don't want to see them forfeit any games. But I think there might be they might be forced to forfeit at least 1 game, which, by the way, should have been last week against Pittsburgh. They shouldn't be doing it this week. It should have been last week when Pittsburgh was supposed to play Tennessee, giving us a free win. But instead, they decided to be annoying about it and potentially do it this week or next week. I don't know when. I think there is definitely a possibility, but like I said, it's the last-ditch effort here. I don't think we'll see 2 games forfeited just because that would be a very bad look for the NFL.
That would be sad anyway, for fans anyway. And then you don't get to see those matchups.
No, but honestly, it's Tennessee. I really don't care either way.
You're also a Pittsburgh guy, so that there is some bias from Sam Teets today.
Look, when they moved our bye week from week 8 to week 4, meaning we have to play 13 weeks in a row, because at Tennessee, I lost all concern for the Tennessee Titans. I have no sympathy for them whatsoever in terms of what happens to them from punishments from the NFL. It is what it is at this point. I'm not overly concerned.
All right. Here comes my first one. The Clippers are not a contender yet. I know we're not finished in this season, but unless they do
taking ahead to next year,
season, what do you think?
All right. Well, Montrezl Harrell's definitely going to leave this year. He was the sixth man of the year. He's definitely gone. There's no way he's coming back. He got annoyed with Paul George. And got annoyed with the special treatment Paul George and Kawhi Leonard were getting. And he wants a lot of money. The Clippers aren't going to be able to pay for that. He was annoyed with the coaching situation. He was annoyed with how the stars were being treated compared to him. He's gone. So basically, you're losing your sixth man of the year. It's going to be a worse roster than what you had this past season, just because you got so lucky with how the pieces fit together financially. They have to be contenders, really, because this is the last year. And then Kawhi, and Paul George can opt out the following offseason. So this might be the last year they have a chance to win a title with this group. And they don't have any draft assets after this because they traded all those away to get Paul George. So you could be one of the worst teams in the NBA if you do not win a title here and keep Kawhi Leonard and Paul George long term. They have to be contenders. So this is you saying that they're not contenders. To me, that's dreaming, because you absolutely have to be contenders here. If you're not, you're basically going to be the worst franchise in the NBA for 5 to 7 years.
That's going to hurt. And then, of course,
the
Lakers will take over if Anthony Davis sticks around. The Lakers will take over as the number one for the LA. I know they already are, but there will be no question after that.
Yeah, the only thing that could stop LA would be LeBron James getting older. We haven't seen what an aging LeBron James looks like. He's matured kind of gracefully, I guess you could say, in how he plays the game. But really, we don't know what happens when LeBron James hits that kind of wall, or when he eventually starts descending down the mountain. He's no longer an MVP candidate, because he was an MVP candidate this year. He finished second behind Giannis. We don't know what LeBron, when he's averaging 17 points per game versus 25 points per game, we don't know what that's going to look like yet. To me, that's the only thing that can knock LA off its pedestal right now.
Yeah, and for LeBron James, the hope here is probably to get a few championships in before he starts aging.
Yeah, he wants one more, at the very least. He's hoping – I mean, he's happy with this. He'll take this. He'll take this, obviously. If he has to win this, and this is his last one, I think he'll accept it. But he wants 5 really bad. Obviously, the goal is to get to 6 there and tie Michael Jordan. But realistically, at this point in his career, that's going to be very tough, especially financially with how the cap situation is in LA, with how your body just breaks down over time, and how I don't know how they're going to manage the season next year, because COVID-19 probably was still going to be an issue when they start. It's going to be interesting. But for LeBron, definitely 5 is the goal. I think he believes he has 4 in his grasp at this point tonight. He's looking forward to 5.
Yeah. The more, the better for him on the all-time rankings. And here's my other thing. I feel like this may have been answered due to what we talked about earlier, but due to Tom Brady's inconsistency, depending on how this season ends, this could be his last season in the NFL.
I'll be honest, I didn't read what you're going to say before the show, and I just read it about 5 seconds before you said it. McGinnis.
He was before I finished.
Yeah, you're dreaming, man. He signed a 2-year deal. He's there for 2 years. I think even if they were to get knocked out in the first round of the playoffs this year, really, he'll be there for next year, because they can still put together a competitive team. I don't think they're that worried about it. So he's going to come back next year. I don't think there's any chance he retires unless he gets injured. That's the only way I can see it happening. Behind that offensive line, maybe he does. But realistically, the only chance Tom Brady decides to walk away from this game early is if he feels like he physically is getting decimated out there. And even then, he's always been a guy who said he wants to keep playing one more year. He's got that mentality. And his wife keeps asking him to retire, and he's ignored her so far for like the past 5 years. So to me, that says he's not going to walk away early if he can avoid it.
Yeah. If he can avoid it, he is a very competitive person. Question is, so let me ask you about this scenario then. It might be unlikely, but hear me out for a moment. Let's say they go 8-8 and they're out in the first round, like you say. From
Yeah.
the organization standpoint, if Tom Brady is inconsistent this whole time and then they end up playing a Bears team and lose and Tom Brady isn't good, does Tampa Bay really want to keep him around?
You really don't have a choice because financially you couldn't afford to get rid of Tom Brady the way his contract is structured right now. I think it's $25 million a year, something like that. And you don't have the cap space to afford to get rid of him and take all the dead cap that would come with his contract. You're kind of stuck with Tom Brady at this point. And really, I mean, the offense Bruce Arians runs is kind of complex. It takes usually a year to get adjusted to it. We saw it with Carson Palmer in Arizona. So realistically, even if Brady struggles a little bit this year, is kind of average. I feel like he should still be better next year because he'll have a better understanding of the offense. So really, you don't want to abandon this project too soon.
All right. And I think that's all we've got for today, unless you have something else.
Now, I just want to remind everyone, check out our sponsor, Replenishing Care and Technologies, specifically the PEMF machine. Whether you're young or old, the machine can help you recover faster from injuries, wear, and tear. So again, check out our sponsor, Replenishing Care and Technologies.
And I've totally bumped off the commercial at this point to Sam Teets because I actually tried to do the commercial one of the times, and then I glitched out in the middle of the beginning a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. And I actually said the commercial while I was glitched out, but yeah, I'm shrugging that responsibility onto you at this point.
That's all right. I got you.
All right. You want to close us out then?
Yeah. We'd like to remind you that the Sam and Sam show is going to be live every week, Friday around 9:30. So please come back. We got a couple episodes already out. Feel free to go check those out on the Grueling Truth Facebook page. Also check out thegruelingtruth.com where we post all of our articles and podcasts. You can see everything we have there. And we got quite a library of things for you this year. We cover all sorts of sports. So feel free to go check that out as well. And make sure you follow the Grueling Truth Facebook page so you can get notifications when we're going live and when we have new videos for you. For now, this has been Sam Teets. For Sam McGinnis, you've been listening to the Sam and Sam Show on the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.